U.S. Senator Kamala Harris is officially on the 2020 trail. On Sunday, the California Democrat formally launched her presidential campaign. She held a massive rally in her hometown of Oakland. In front of the estimated 20,000-person crowd, Harris had this to say about why she's vying for the White House.
People in power are trying to convince us that the villain in our American story is each other. But that is not our story. That is not who we are. That is not our America.
Let's bring in Melanie Mason. She's a political reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Melanie, thanks so much for joining us. Senator Harris is another candidate in a long list of growing Democratic contenders. How does her campaign rollout set her apart from the other candidates?
This was a particularly splashy campaign rollout, in part because it lasted a whole week. She started last week on MLK Jr. Day, announcing on Good Morning America that she was going to be running. And then ever since then, it was just one day after another, very smart sort of dribbling out of news. And what we saw on Sunday was this real massive turnout in her hometown of Oakland. And I think that really helps generate the buzz that she is a top-tier presidential candidate.
Well, Harris hardly touched on her record as a sitting U.S. Senator during the rally. However, her slogan is Kamala Harris for the people, putting the focus on her background as a prosecutor instead. What's the strategy there?
I think part of it is taking what might be a perceived vulnerability and addressing it head on. Because Harris has been a prosecutor for so long, there's a lot in her record that people will be able to pick apart, and she might be facing a little bit of pushback, particularly from folks on the left who think that she wasn't aggressive or assertive enough in pursuing criminal justice reform. So I think by taking the prosecutor angle and making that a central point of her campaign, she's sort of saying, bring it. I want to talk about my record. I want to talk about how I approached being a progressive prosecutor and what that means. And so I think that that in some ways buffers some attacks that she might be facing from the left.
Could that be, though, perilous, politically speaking? You know, she has faced a great deal of scrutiny for her past as California's Attorney General. You mentioned some of the criticism there. I mean, how much of that could be seen as a liability on the campaign trail?
I think that's definitely a possibility, particularly in the Democratic primary, because there has been so much conversation, particularly over the last couple of years, about police shootings, the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I think that by her highlighting this prosecutorial background, this naturally begs the question, well, what did you do when you were in those positions of power? How did you deal with these issues? But I do think there's a calculus from her campaign that if they're looking ahead to a general election, the idea of somebody who has law enforcement experience, who can say to maybe a more moderate general election voters that she can pursue safety, that she knows how to pursue criminal justice. I think that they see as a stronger general election message, and so they want to lean into it early.
Melanie, you cover politics, of course, in California. Are voters in the state happy with the job Senator Harris has done so far as a senator on the national stage?
I think they're pleased to see a California figure be so high profile, and of course we also have folks like Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy, so we're no stranger to having some pretty high profile political figures. But I do think that there is a good question about, you know, she has only been in the Senate for 2 years, and so I did hear from some people at the rally yesterday, maybe it feels a little early. Of course, the parallels always come up with President Barack Obama, who was only in the Senate for 2 years before he pursued his own presidential bid. So I think that the experience question, or the how long was she representing us question, is a little bit buffered by the fact that you do have somebody like Obama breaking that barrier.
Senator Harris is a vocal opponent, of course, of the Trump administration. Let's listen to some of what she had to say on Sunday.
We are at an inflection point in the history of our world. We are at an inflection point in the history of our nation. We are here because the American dream and our American democracy are under attack and on the line like never before.
Melanie, I know you've reported on this. As she builds her campaign, how much will President Trump be a focus on the trail, and what do you make of that as a strategy?
I think that President Trump is absolutely going to be a focus on the trail because that's what Democratic primary voters are demanding. The thing I heard from the crowd more than anything else was they were looking for a Democrat who could beat Donald Trump, take the fight to Donald Trump. And so I think that's why we're going to see Senator Harris and, quite frankly, most of the Democrats using the president as a foil. But I think that in a lot of the themes that she laid out in that early speech talking about being a truth teller, talking about treating people with integrity, the comparison was always implicit to the president. It was interesting because her speech didn't actually name President Trump once, but there was no question who she was talking about.
Right, right. All right, Melanie Mason for us. Melanie, thanks very much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.